Hello, everyone. My name's Aaron Christensen. This is Horror 101 with Dr. AC, celebrating classic horror throughout history with new episodes every Friday night. Tonight, we're going to be revisiting the world of Val Lewton. We covered 3 of his films a little while back, The Leopard Man, I Walked with a Zombie, and The Seventh Victim. Tonight, we'll be discussing 2 of his films from 1945, both celebrating their 80th anniversary, both starring Boris Karloff, and both masterful examples of the atmosphere of gloom and dread that Lewton's film come to epitomize. The Body Snatcher and Isle of the Dead.
No one may leave the island.
I'm afraid you'll have to make an exception in my case, General. I'm traveling on urgent business for my government.
No one may leave the island.
I don't know what's the matter with the General. Something up here. You'd better stay out of his way.
Look! She's dead. Look into the eyes of that one. You'll see how she died. You and I should work together.
You mean we would sell the bodies to the doctors together?
To dig them up, there'll be no digging. The kirkyards are too well guarded. We will, so to speak, burk them.
It's like Burke and Hare all over again. That is, grave robbing is one thing, but this is murder.
Gray, I must be rid of you. You become a cancer, a malignant evil cancer, rotting my mind.
You'll never get rid of me, Tony.
Time to step into the shadows with his amazing double feature of Val Lewton and Boris Karloff. And we have an equally amazing panel to chat about them with me. Let's bring everybody in and let's say hello to Tyler Pistorius.
Thank you for having me back, AC.
Steve Archecki.
Great to be here. Thank you again. And just a quick word of warning. No one may leave the island.
John Kitley.
Good morning.
And Mike Mayo.
Greetings.
And we're going to be chatting about The Body Snatcher, 1945, and Isle of the Dead, also from 1945. Thanks for coming on the show, buddy, and welcome. So we are going to be talking about these 2 awesome Val Lewton movies where we saw Boris Karloff enter the RKO frame for the first time. And I'm just curious to hear what people's exposure to Val Lewton was, and then perhaps how these films came into their radar for the first time. Tyler, would you mind kicking us off?
Don't mind at all. In fact, it was Christmas of 2009 when I was given a surprise present from my mother and my father. And it's this beautiful box set that also includes a documentary presented by Martin Scorsese about Val Lewton, in which Val Lewton himself is voiced by Elias Koteas. And I'm looking through the titles of these when I open this up, and I read, I Walked with a Zombie. And I thought, well, that's an amazing title. And I thought that these were going to be, kind of B-movie schlock fare. But then I put in cat people for the first time. And I thought, okay, we're going to be seeing people turn into cats. Not that kind of movie. It's much more psychological, much more cerebral. And I went through the rest of these, including, but not limited to, both Isle of the Dead and The Body Snatcher, and completely saw Boris Karloff in a completely new light. And not to mention The Body Snatcher, I kind of see that for me as the equivalent of Al Pacino and Robert De Niro in Heat when they meet in a coffee shop, when they have their one scene together in The Body Snatcher, being like, okay, this is like the meeting of the minds, this is the meeting of the icons, and it's everything that you would ever hope for. Now, this is a great set that I've got here, and unfortunately, it's out of print. So if you ever find this set anywhere, listeners and viewers, pick it up because you will not regret it. That was my exposure to both The Body Snatcher and Isle of the Dead, along with the rest of his catalog.
Yeah, my hope is that we will see a bright, shiny reissue at some point soon.
They've been releasing these on 4K individually or as a double feature. I think
Okay.
Seventh Victim and
Seventh Victim, I Walk with a Zombie.
yeah, those were as
and
a
Cat
double
People.
feature, and then Cat People was by itself. So they are re-releasing these. And
Good. Steve, how about you? How did you come to Val Luton for the first time?
Well, I first came to Val Luton when I was a very, very, very young child. My dad, who's no longer with us, he's been gone for 29 years now. But I remember, as a kid, being a horror kid, I loved Boris Karloff. And I remember him specifically, I remember it like it was yesterday, him saying, okay, I love this movie. He loved Isle of the Dead. And I remember sitting on the couch with him. I may have even been in his lap. I mean, I was probably like 6 or 7 years old. And he showed me Isle of the Dead, and I was hooked from there. I had no idea who Val Luton was at that point, but I did know Boris Karloff. So that movie has always been special to me, and I'm passing it along to my son as well, and he loved it. He watched it for the first time. And as far as the Body Snatcher, just being a typical 70s horror kid, I'm sure I saw it, probably in my teenage years, but and it's funny you mentioned those old DVDs, because I was telling AC about a week ago, we were chatting. I own two of them. Of course, one of them was the Body Snatcher, and I'm not sure if you guys heard, but Warner Brothers, some of their old DVDs are deteriorating. They're no longer playable. And sure enough, I went to put on Body Snatcher again, and I have one of those affected DVDs. So,
John, how about you?
I remember renting Cat People on VHS way long ago. So I kind of knew who Val Luton was at the time, but even before that, anything with Boris Karloff, I would find and watch. So I do remember, and Isle of the Dead was on VHS, same with Body Snatchers. But Body Snatcher is still remains one of probably my second, maybe first favorite Karloff performance, because he is so good in that. With Robert Wise directing, and it was a great example of when you see, especially when you read and find out more about Luton, what he did when he was hired by RKO, and the movies they wanted him to make and the movies he made are incredible. But yeah, they both are incredible pieces of cinema, which shows what Val Luton was doing, but also what Karloff could do outside the typical monster makeup stuff.
And Mike, you actually contributed the essay for Hidden Horror for Isle of the Dead. Just kind of set the context for that. I mean, basically, I just said, hey, what are some movies you would like to highlight, ones you feel like don't get enough credit? And that was the first one that came to your mind. I'm curious, like, what was it about that movie?
Well, I discovered Val Luton when I was a graduate student at what's now Hollins University. And there, my kind of main professor was a man named Richard Dillard. And this is his book on the horror film that was printed. This goes back to the 70s. And he was really the first teacher who showed me that things that are normally considered just entertainment can be viewed as serious art and discussed that way. And he showed Cat People. Richard would just find films that he liked and get prints of them and show them in the projection room that we had up above the English building. And I remember being a bit disappointed in Cat People the first time I saw it, expecting more conventional horror and not something quite as restrained as it was. But I could tell this is a really good film, and it's something I should be paying more attention to, just because it doesn't give me the cheap thrill that I want out of a horror movie. And so I started paying more attention to it, and it was then when I started working on the first horror show book that I saw Body Snatcher for the first time and discovered Isle of the Dead. And I have to agree with John. I think Body Snatcher is just an incredible work. I watched it again for this, probably hadn't seen it in 15, 20 years. I'm so glad I've got the DVD on my shelf now, because this is one that belongs in everybody's collection. That's the long and short of it.
And how about Isle of the Dead? Again, that was one that you decided you wanted to highlight.
Again, it goes back to when I was doing horror show. I was just getting an awful lot of my movies from the local video stores. And I happened to come across this Karloff that I had never seen. and it was, Isle of the Dead. And oh, wow. And so I knew that it was from that period, along with Body Snatchers. So it would, I was assuming it would be as good as it was. And I found it to be, again, just one of his great performances. I would put it second to Body Snatchers, simply because I think Body Snatchers is overall a better movie, a classier production, a more expensive production than Isle of the Dead. Not to denigrate Isle of the Dead at all, because I think it is just a terrific film. And I really enjoyed watching it again, too, for this. Though I have to say, I saw it, I had to stream it. I couldn't get a hold of a disc. And the image quality was really crummy on the stream. Whereas Body Snatchers, the Blu-ray of it, just, looked terrific. I mean, it looked like it just came out of the lab.
Yeah, that's my hope is that we've been getting these 4K restorations that we continue to get all of his canon. I first came aware of Val Lewton via Carlos Claren's Illustrated History of the Horror Film. There's like a big chapter on him. It's not a long book, and he dedicates maybe 15, 20 pages to Val Lewton. So Val Lewton came highly recommended, but I didn't actually get to encounter any of his movies. I think I saw Cat People for the first time probably 2004, so very late in the game. And it's one of those, you come to it, you've been hearing all these great things. You're like, okay, well, I'll set my expectations. I don't expect this to be as good as everybody says it is. And it was just as good. I was blown away by Cat People. And then watching Body Snatcher, it was the same kind of thing where I'd seen Karloff in a ton of stuff by then, but suddenly here was him, and such a range he gets to play. I think that's one of the reasons why people talk about that performance versus Isle of the Dead, is that he just gets to play so many different colors. You get to see him, kindly to the little girl, but then extremely dark and nefarious in the rest of his life. I love these two movies, and I'm glad that we're getting to chat about them together, kind of in conversation with one another, because this was an opportunity for Karloff to show what he could do, and Val Lewton had been showing people what he could do with a crummy title and a really big idea for a few years at this point. John, let's go ahead and kick things off with The Body Snatcher. I know this is one of your favorite films. It was one that we included in Horror 101, the book. What are some of the things you really like about this movie? What are the things that kind of sing out about it?
Karloff's performance is half the movie for me, but this was the film is set at a time where several years later, after the whole Burke and Hare story, where they were grave robbers that were first stealing bodies for selling them to the medical colleges, and then couldn't find enough they figured it was easier just to kill people than dig them up. So Body Snatchers takes place sometime after that, where Karloff's character Gray, the cabbie, had some affiliation with Burke and Hare, so he continues the work they did. And Todd McFarlane, Henry Daniels, plays the doctor that runs the school, who is acquiring these bodies from Karloff. And Karloff uses that against him, because Henry Daniels plays this very upper class, very prolific doctor, but Karloff is this simple cabbie, but brings him down to his level because he knows he can blackmail him. And the conversations that they have are some of the best written, best performed sequences, when it's very devious, but not in the words that they're saying, in the way they're saying. Karloff is one of the most friendliest characters as he's talking and kind of friendly jibbing Henry Daniels, but it's so dark because the context of what he's saying. It's got a very decent story because Henry Daniels plays the doctor who's trying to do good, but he's got his foot still buried in the old ways, and he can't get away from that. Boris Karloff will not let him forget that either. So Bela Lugosi has a very small role, which is kind of cool, but also kind of sad, because especially since Karloff is so good, Lugosi kind of gets lost in the way there. It's one of those things that Karloff had said he had thanked Lewton for saving his life, because Karloff was getting tired of doing the same old monster shtick. He gave him a chance to play a real character. That's why he continued to make movies for Lewton, because of that. But I think it's one of those that you don't have monsters in it except the humankind, and those are the scariest.
When Boris Karloff was brought in, that's also when they brought in Jack Gross from Universal. And Luton was not a fan of Jack Gross at all. I mean, we've all had those jobs in the past where they brought in some new person above you and you're like, oh my God, are you seriously? And I think one of Gross's, demands was, well, you not only got me, you got Boris Karloff as well. Luton was not a fan of that at all. But it turns out him and Karloff became lifelong friends. I mean, they worked so well together. Those three movies, just phenomenal, one after the other after the other. They're so great. And as far as what John was saying about that dialogue between the two of them, I mean, Karloff is just playing off of McFarlane in those scenes in the bar. Some of that dialogue is so great. I mean, he's just, he says basically, I think perhaps you're afraid to be a doctor, and you have these eyes, full of knowledge, but absolutely no sense of understanding or sympathy. And he's just getting under McFarlane's skin. It's great. And my favorite line in the whole movie, it makes me laugh every time, is when Karloff is trying to explain the Burke and Hare story to Bela Lugosi, Joseph, and he starts singing a song, an old folk song about this is what happened. And Lugosi just looks at him and he goes, I do not understand the song. Explain it to me. So it makes me feel like, listening to my daughter's music. I'm like, I don't understand the song. I always get a kick out of that.
Mike?
Going back to what John said, what we've been talking about, that great pub scene, the long scene right kind of in the middle of the film. What really entranced me, because the writing was so good, was Karloff's voice. He does so much with it. And especially when you think of the other great role of his as the monster, which has virtually no dialogue. He was just so wonderful in that scene. That's the moment to me when the movie really comes alive there. And you know what an incredible character he is. And I hadn't thought much about the difference in the social standing of the two characters. And that is, of course, very important to it, to the story as a whole. Boy, did that ever just, work for me and drew me into the film in a way that doesn't happen very often, particularly in a horror film. And it really sets up, what happens. I'm sure we'll be talking about this more later. The first killing scene, so wonderfully done. I guess, again, just his voice and how effective it was. It's almost all done in close-ups of him, too. It's really done with close-ups of him and through the close shots of their faces. And they reveal so much.
Russell Wade plays Donald Fetz, the student. We've been talking about the dialogue. This is one of those, like most of Luton's films, where he had a very strong hand in the screenplay. Philip McDonald is the credited screenwriter, and Carlos Keith is Luton's pen name here. But he was kind of one of those very hands-on producers. There's a reason why we talk about him, the producer, as much as we do, say, the directors. And I think that comes from his tenure under David Selznick, where he saw a producer really exerting a look and a feel to the films. Luton was a writer. He was an author of several short stories and novels. And so he definitely had a way with words. I love those scenes between Henry Daniell's character and Boris Karloff. And it's two actors, who are both really, really good and able to match each other.
Steve, John, Mike, you have all said so much about what I love about this movie. The other thing I want to mention about Val Luton's skills is the way he's able to write atmosphere. And we're going to be hearing that again. You're going to hear that from me again when we talk about Isle of the Dead. But just the tone and the atmosphere of the Body Snatcher is so thick and so intoxicating. And there are extended sequences like when Boris Karloff's character kills the dog, for instance. Now, usually when a dog dies in a movie, I think, okay, you need to have a really damn good reason to depict that. Otherwise, I can tell you're just playing with my emotions and I don't like it. But with this, it does have a very good reason to do so. And also the execution of it, where that entire scene is done completely in shadow. Boris Karloff take the shovel up and then bring it down onto the dog and everything. And then you see the result of that the poor character carrying that dead dog afterwards. I also did, superficially speaking, did get a good laugh out of hearing Toddy McFarlane's name being said, because I kept thinking of the comic book artist Todd McFarlane.
Yeah. Well, and I love how Cabman Gray, Karloff's character, is constantly needling the doctor by refusing to give him his status. He doesn't refer to him as Dr. McFarlane. He refers to him as Toddy, which sounds like, a lower class character. And there is so much of that at play here. The power struggle between those. You have the level of student and professor. You have Fetz's character becoming the assistant. He's somebody who is of a lower class, and McFarlane is choosing to bring him up by giving him this position, giving him tuition, etc. Henry Daniell plays his cards very close to his chest. He doesn't play a lot of range in the way that Karloff does, but Luton and Philip McDonald's screenplay allows us to see different sides of that character. There's the whole romance with his maid, who's, somebody who he's had to employ because she was falling, into the gutter, as it were.
He certainly has the worst bedside manner of about any doctor who ever appeared in a movie, especially when he demands that the little girl stand up and walk. Yeah. What's the matter with you?
Well, plus the whole fact that I don't know if I can do this, so I'm not going to do it. I don't care if you're crippled or not. I don't care. I don't care. Until Gray blackmails him or forces him into doing it, he's like, I'm not going to do it. Nope, sorry. But yeah, he's a brilliant doctor, scientist, but a lousy person when it comes to talking to his patients.
That detachment, I think, is something that, we see in doctors. They kind of have to. You can't get too attached to the patient as a human. They have to be a patient. And he sees this as an opportunity, the ability to demonstrate his abilities as a physician, which is why he's so frustrated when the little girl, he's operating on her spinal condition so that she can walk again. And I think that's why he gets so frustrated with her. He's like, no, though, this reflects badly on me.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the relationship between McFarlane and his assistant, Donald Fetz, who's kind of played by Russell Wade, who is kind of the young innocent. We see a lot of the movie through his eyes, at least in terms of approaching these two men. I feel like it's kind of like Platoon, where you've got Elias on one hand and you've got, Tom Berenger on the other. And it's like, well, which one are we going to follow? Which path are we going to follow?
And both of them are really trying to manipulate the doctor to force him to do what they want for their own reasons.
Well, and I feel like McFarlane is trying to mold Fetz into himself as well. Yes. Like he wants him to be detached. He wants him to be a successful physician, again, because it reflects well on him as the instructor.
You have a really good difference of character where Daniels is all about standing and reputation, to the fact that his wife has to play the maid because of the background there, that he doesn't want anybody to know that, and what that does to that relationship. Like you said, Aaron, he wants Fetz to be like him. Fetz is young enough and still emotional enough to go, this isn't right. Mm-hmm. What we're doing here, as far as either with the little girl or especially with the aspect of where they're getting the bodies from. And he has that trouble of accepting that. Now, whether or not that's right or wrong to go that direction at that time for medical research, but you can see the different, like almost like that was Daniel's character, Toddy McFarlane, years ago. He may have been the same way, right. And now he's trying to force Fetz to get to where he is, and to do that, you have to, no pun intended, cut out the emotions and move on from there. And some people can't do that.
And if I would have one criticism of the film, it'd be that not more is done with the wife. That there could have been a lot more to that relationship, but it's probably best not to have it if you're going to really focus on the whole, professional part of it.
Sure. Steve?
Yeah, there was actually one scene towards the end where McFarlane's speaking to his wife, and she's saying, she wants Fetz to, let him go, let him leave, let him do his own thing. And McFarlane basically says something to the effect of, well, when I was a student of Dr. Knox, I behaved the same way. So yeah, it kind of ties back maybe to a younger version of himself, that he's just trying to change his whole demeanor and his whole outlook.
Yeah, and Knox being the person who was working with Burke and Hare, that shadow looms heavy, and it's kind of like, do we see the succession this way or do we see the succession this way? I do like how the movie kind of ends, is that we do kind of see Fetz walking off, and we're kind of like, which road will he take? It's very because McFarlane isn't wrong. Like, you have to do, in order for medical science to progress, you're going to have to do things above and beyond. You're going to have to take chances. You're going to have to do things that aren't, quote, moral, in order to achieve the greater good. And I think that's something that we see Henry Daniell playing with as an actor, is like, how do I show both sides of that? That true, I'm doing this for the greater good, even if it means sinning along the way. Tyler?
Mike, I do agree as well that I wish we could have gotten a little bit more of the wife. I'm getting assumed that it's just probably just a limitation of budgets and also of the runtime. That's the other thing. This is a very short movie.
Yeah,
very short.
Very short. It's not even 80 minutes. I could have gone like an extra 15 minutes exploring that relationship, exploring the relationship with the wife. And it's my only like minor criticism of this movie. But other than that, I don't really have much to add in terms of that particular relationship with those two, because all four of you have said it so perfectly.
One relationship we haven't really talked about yet is the relationship of Cabman Gray and Joseph. Joseph being McFarlane's kind of porter, assistant, person who cleans up around the lab. And it kind of reflects on, where Lugosi was in his career at the time. He was reduced to this lower standing, and Luton was the one who brought him in.
They mentioned in one of the commentary tracks on the Blu-ray that it was essentially, just to get Lugosi's name on the marquee, on the posters. It is kind of, it's a shame that the role is so small, when you would hope that there would be more of those two together, in the way there was in like the Black Cat and things like that. It made me sad to see him. He is made up so poorly. He's kind of got a variation on Mo Howard's haircut that doesn't do him any favors at all. And
that's definitely more of a Shemp than a
yeah, okay. And speaking of hair, the mother of the little girl, did you notice those incredible Princess Leia buns that she had her hair wound up into? Once I saw that, I couldn't take my eyes off it. And that's a problem of mine, that whenever a main character in a movie has weird hair, I get fixated on it and I can't see anything else for the rest of the film.
Now that, Mike, you mentioned the Black Cat, which was 11 years prior to this.
Yeah, 34. Yeah.
If you watch the performance between Karloff and Lugosi there, and then watch the performance here, it is even more depressing. The fact that where Lugosi was and is now in that time period is really a shame, because in the Black Cat, he's at least pretty close to being on par with Karloff in their performance, where here he almost seems lost. And that is only 10 years. And it's sad to see the effects of his career had gone in that direction, that he was kind of thrown this bone to be in this film. And he does what he can, but you can just see that he is nowhere near on the same level as Karloff.
Well, and he's not given the opportunity to either. I think that's another thing. Is that this is also, I think, Lugosi was an actor and a good one. And I think he is playing a character here who is a little slow, who is downtrodden, who, I think he's acting, but it's also kind of unfortunate that it's mirroring where he's at, where he's just not given the colors to play with. Any other, star power. I think they originally were thinking, well, it'd be great if he could play McFarlane, but that just wasn't in the cards. But watching him play Joseph, he's playing a character that is that is tired and defeated. And I think, if he'd been given more colors to play, he could have done those as well. It's unfortunate that I think people would come to this and see Lugosi and go, oh, he's so poor and tired and worn out and at the end of his rope. It's like he still has years ahead of him. They aren't the best years, but like he's still got what it takes as an actor. And I like to look at his performance as fulfilling what was on the page. Yeah. Steve?
Looking back at Lugosi's career, very depressing. But I think he sums it up. His character sums it up really, really good with one line when he's trying to bribe the cabman. He just says, "Give me money." Mm-hmm. Yep. That's it. Just you give me money. That's it.
And it's an opportunity, one more time, of watching a character try to exert power over another. I mean, that's what he's doing. He's thinking he can blackmail Gray, and Gray just completely outclasses him. Like he's completely punching outside of his weight division here.
And I don't know enough about the timeline of Lugosi's career. Had the drugs become a problem at that point?
Yes, he was well into his morphine stage at that point.
But this was still about 8 years before Glenn or Glenda.
Right.
I believe.
He hadn't started working with Ed Wood. I mean, I think that's like 57, 58.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So even more than 8 years. Yeah.
So he had a career still ahead, but again, this is not whereas you see Karloff, and he's absolutely at the height of his power. Like he's doing what he wants to do. He's working with who he wants to work with. Mm-hmm. Mike, you alluded earlier, and I want to kind of circle back around to some of the favorite moments of Body Snatcher. You were talking about, we talked about the murder of the dog, but there's another murder that's really just chilling.
It is so beautifully set up. And again, I don't want to, there are probably listeners and viewers who haven't seen these movies and are going to, I hope.
Here, watch this, folks. Yeah. Hey, spoilers ahead. So if you haven't seen these movies, please halt and return when you have. Carry on, Mike.
Karloff's character, Gray, kills a young woman. And it happens off camera, and it is one of the most beautifully composed shots you will ever see in a black and white movie. Just the way the sets are arranged, the way Karloff and the horse come through, the noise of the horse's hooves going, the young woman walking away, the rain coming down from the right side of the screen. It's just beautifully, beautifully set up. And according to the commentary on the disc, that is indeed Karloff on the cart driving it, even though this was done late at night on a very cold and rainy night. Apparently, he wanted to be in it. You can't see his face at all. But the whole thing just works beautifully. Even if you know exactly what's going to happen when you see it, it just still does everything it's supposed to do.
It's a perfect example of, now whether this was Robert Wise, the director, or Lewton, but that's a perfect example of a Lewton film. There's a lot of stuff that happens off screen that you don't see, but it's either made because of the ratings or whatever, but it's how Lewton and them did it that is so effective, whether it's in Cat People or The Leopard Man. But that shot of the cab of the street singer walking into the darkness, still singing, and then like Mike said, you can hear the sound of the horse going, following into the darkness, and then one of the noises stops, one of the sounds stops, and it is, you don't see anything. It's just what you hear and what is implied of what is happening that we're not witness to. But I think that right there is the epitome of what Lewton did so well. As a younger fan, you might, looking for the monster movies and all the gore and all that stuff, you're going to walk away slightly disappointed. But you get a little older and a little smarter, and you start watching this stuff, you're like, holy crap, is this done really effective? And I know someone mentioned earlier with Cat People, I was disappointed myself the first time I watched it because there's no cat people.
Yeah.
But when you watch it a little bit smarter, a little bit older, and you're like, the subtext and everything that's going on in there is unbelievable. So anything you watch of Lewton stuff, it is so incredible what I would say that he gets away with without showing you anything.
Yeah, and also don't forget keep a close eye because there is the patented, what do they call it?
The bus.
The Luton walk. The Luton walk.
Oh, the walk.
Luton
Sure.
walk, yeah.
Yeah, when Fetz is looking for the cabman, he's walking through the streets, and sure enough, instead of a bus, this time it's a horse.
Yeah.
One of my favorite scenes, though, in the movie is when Gray is dropping off his first specimen, his first corpse, and he arrives, and instead of McFarlane's usual assistant, he's met by Fetz. And he's like, well, here it is. Put it on the table. He goes, he reminds me of Steve Buscemi in Fargo when he gets pulled over by the state trooper. He wants to be in full compliance. He's like, you probably have the key in your pocket. Go over to the thing. It's 10 pounds. Put it over here. Mark it. Put your entry in the ledger. I want to be in full compliance. I love that scene.
Well, just something you were touching upon, John, is the use of sound in the movie, and it kind of reinforces that theory that perhaps sound is sometimes more than the image with what you see in a movie, and it's certainly no exception with the Body Snatcher, like you were describing with the killing of that young woman. Yeah, how much they were able to work with sound to basically stick the landing and hit the audience in that manner to make it really effective is so great to experience. And another sequence another scene I do really like. I do like the ending with the little girl who's able to get up on her feet, mainly because she really wanted to see something over the edge. It was I think it was the white horse.
Yeah.
She really wanted to see that, and that's how she's able to get up on her feet. And it wasn't any of the tyrannical doctors lack of bedside manner, anything like that. It was just on her own desire to see something. I mean, it is fantastical there, but still on an emotional level, very satisfying.
There's something I also like. It's kind of a callback to what's going on with Cat People, where we see the very violent murder of Joseph, where Cabman Gray burks him by putting his hand over his nose and mouth and basically suffocating him. And that scene, again, unlike the murder of the street singer, who's blind, by the way, the fact that she's a young, blind street singer, I'm like, and then Cabman Gray murders him, and we still follow him. We still find him interesting and intriguing. I mean, I think that's a kind of the great sign of a wonderful villain. But the fight between Gray and Joseph is so violent, and then we see it repeated with McFarlane and Gray, and we know what Gray is capable of. We know what he's trying to do at that point. I love that scene with him and Joseph where he says, just hold still. Let me just put my hand here. I'm just showing you what's going to happen here.
And going back to the killing of the street singer, the pace of that scene, just the methodical, of way the footsteps go, it just builds so beautifully. It really could not have been any slower or any quicker. It wouldn't have been nearly as effective.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, and those sets don't hurt. I mean,
no, yeah,
they're obvious. They're totally obviously indoor sets. But the cobblestone and the lighting and the shadows, it's phenomenal. It really is breathtaking.
Yeah, this is Luton operating on a budget. When we talked about his films from 1943, where I Walked with a Zombie and Seventh Victim. Leopard Man also has just one of my favorite, again, one of those unseen murders that is utterly chilling. When you see the blood come under the door, or when you hear the street singer's voice stop, like something beautiful has died here. There's an emotional cost for the viewer. But yeah, Robert Wise directing this. I mean, he'd done Curse of the Cat People for Luton. This was his second opportunity in the director's chair. And I think we really see him start to come into his own. And as a director, he would use that same kind of restraint in the 1963 film, The Haunting, where we don't see hardly anything, but it's still all about the atmosphere and the performances. Kind of what we're talking about. I mean, I know we give a lot of credit to Luton for the look and the feel of these things, but I think we also have a really sensitive and intelligent director in Robert Wise.
I mean, you want to talk about a career. I mean, he went on to direct West Side Story, The Sound of Music, The Day the Earth Stood Still, and he was a film editor on
and Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
There you go. That's right. That's right. and he was a film editor along with Robeson for Orson Welles and Citizen Kane. I mean, you want to talk about a career. Wow.
Did a terrific little boxing movie called The Setup that is kind of a real-time movie that is just terrific and worth any viewer's time to see it.
Well, it's funny. We're going to talk about Mark Robeson, but he also did Champion.
Yeah.
Mark Robeson did Champion with Kirk Douglas. Boxing movies were a big thing.
Yeah.
Not to take anything away from him, but I think those early years of him working with Luton,
yes,
he took and learned a lot of that style, that way of filmmaking, and just continued on with it. Because, like you said, with The Haunting, if that would have been made in the 40s, that would have been a Val Luton film. That would have been exactly what Luton would have done. So he just did it 20 years later, perfecting it even more so on his own. I would say a great companion piece for this is the 1959 Flesh and the Fiends with Peter Cushing, Donald Pleasance, because that is the story of Burke and Hare. Peter Cushing playing Dr. Knox, a little bit different than Henry Daniels, but another amazing performance. And Burke and Hare are not the kind of characters that Cabman Gray is, where you kind of like, oh, he's really evil, but I'm interested in him. No, Burke and Hare are the worst.
I've never seen that. I've got to put it on my list.
Oh,
yeah, it's
Cushing
good.
is unbelievable.
Well, and Doctor and the Devils, I think, tells the story as well.
That's
it's
another one.
Not as successful, but I think Timothy Dalton plays the Knox character there. Yeah, let's switch gears to Isle of the Dead, which came out later that year, also starring Boris Karloff and directed by Mark Robeson. Would anybody like to do kind of a basic premise of that?
Okay, we're in the Balkan War, 1912, I believe, second. And the Karloff character is a general who is known as a very tough, hard guy and will do anything to protect his troops. In the opening scene, he dresses down another officer for not doing that, and is just really, really tough on the guy. So tough that a young reporter who's with him kind of, questions him about it. And Karloff explains that, exactly, why he's trying to do this. And it's not that he's unemotional. In fact, his wife is buried on a nearby island, and he suggests that he take the young reporter over there. They go to the island where she's buried, meet some other characters there, and then we learn that the plague has infected the island, and Karloff's character refuses to let any of the people on the island go back to the mainland to protect his troops who are there. He says, we cannot let this disease get over to the mainland. And then some real strange stuff happens on the island.
John, how did you come to this movie for the first time? And what were your initial takeaways?
It was on VHS back in the 90s, 80s, somewhere. Again, renting anything that had Boris Karloff in it. Initially was probably not as intrigued with it as my older self is, because I was, again, looking for the monsters. Again, what Luton and Robeson does here is what they don't show you, and the atmosphere and a cluster of really interesting characters on this island that are trapped there, but also and this is something that was obviously lost on me in my younger years, but the old ways and the new ways of fighting each other, because you have I guess the maid or the housekeeper, or someone that's keeping the house in order for the people living there, is very old school, and that this character, we're all dying because not of the plague, but because of this character, goes to convince the general Karloff of this, and he's like, you and your old woman and your old ways and stuff. But then as stuff starts to happen, he starts to lose his belief and starting to believe her. And that's when you get into that dangerous element of going, okay, we're slowly working into this mob mentality because we're believing someone just on speculation. And then something even scarier happens to throw it all even into a real whirlwind of what the hell's going on. But the atmosphere is there. And I love the different characters that are on the island that are trapped there. And I think they're highly entertaining, and you care about everybody that's going on there, and trying to figure out what is actually behind all of this.
I agree. This movie is all about just mood and atmosphere. I mean, that's what drives this movie. Obviously, Karloff's performance, I think, is just as good as the Body Snatcher. I absolutely love this movie. But yeah, John, you're right. I mean, it's the old school versus the new school. It's the superstition and or religion versus science and medicine. The one question I had, maybe you guys can answer it, but what is there like a pivotal point where Karloff just goes off the deep end and starts believing Kyra? Is there a specific scene when that happens? Because I know it at first he's like, get out of here, you crazy old woman, this is superstition and whatever. But towards, at the end, I mean, he's completely just on the other side.
I don't think it's a specific scene. I think his belief slowly starts to deteriorate because he's losing control.
Yeah.
And as a general being in charge of these troops, he has to has control, which is the whole point of the opening scene that Mike mentioned, which is devastating when you're watching this going, okay, I cannot like this character for what he just did because I don't understand it as what he did as a general. So he has to have control. And the longer they're on the island, he is losing that control. And that's when he goes, I'm going to start. I have to go the other way now because I can't do what I've been doing.
He's not successful in his old ways. Yeah. And that opening scene, if you notice, Karloff doesn't have one word of dialogue. It's all in the eyes, and he pushes the revolver. It's just, what a great scene.
I saw Isle of the Dead before I watched The Body Snatcher, my first time seeing it, whenever I got this box sets. And I remember, because I think prior to seeing Isle of the Dead, the only Karloff movies that I had seen were Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein. So I was only used to him playing the creature. So you actually getting to see him basically act, not that he's not acting as the creature, because he is, but getting him to speak like a regular person. I still wonder in my head if there is something supernatural that's happening on the island, or is it just the basis that the fact that this general is isolated on this island with so few people and all these things are happening, and then that's why he gradually loses his mind. I still kind of play with that in my head a little bit. I'm kind of leaning towards the latter, but there's still sort of a supernatural element to it. I think it just comes from the rich, moody atmosphere of it all. That was the thing that I also took away from this. Like I said, with the Body Snatcher, it also contains what I think is one of the absolute scariest moments in any of the Val Lewton produced movies. So spoilers again, viewers and listeners. It's with Catherine Emery, who plays Miss Mary St. Aubin.
Yep.
It's when she is she's put into a trance. She's unconscious. They think that she's dead, so they go ahead and bury her. For me, the single scariest moment in any of Val Lewton's movies, and feel free to disagree, is when you hear her screaming inside that coffin, basically. Yeah. Having a dad who's claustrophobic, so having a bit of that, and also just that general fear of being buried alive. The way that is executed is so perfectly done. That scream still has never left my brain since 2009, 2010 when I first saw this movie.
Well, I think any fans of Edgar Allan Poe will be like, that sounds like a little House of Usher we got going there. And he sets it up so beautifully. And then you know how it's going to unfold, and yet it's still really effective. And her emergence from the grave, almost as an avenging angel, and she's in that white flowing, and she comes and takes the trident, which can also be like the devil's pitchfork. I'm kind of like, oh wow, we got all sorts of imagery going on here. But I agree. This was one of the first times I'd seen Karloff with his kind of like curly hair, because he does that. He returns to that when he does Black Sabbath, the Vertilac, which I was like, Vertilac for Volca. Yeah. Hang on a second. This sounds familiar. But to watch him with that looking unlike any other version of Karloff I'd seen before.
Yeah.
And that very stern and reserved. He's, again, keeping everything very close. You can see all of it happening in his eyes. Unlike, say, Cabman Gray, who's free with the smile and the sardonic and the sarcasm and the kindliness. For General Frades, we get pretty much just one mask with a lot of stuff happening all around it. Like when you see him, as John was saying, when you see him start to lose control, he's grasping for whatever the answers are. You know, as a general, he has a strategy as to how to plan a campaign. If that campaign doesn't work, you have to be able to adjust on the battlefield. And I think that's what he's trying to do. He's like, well, if it's not rational, it's got to be supernatural. And let's go with that.
And going back to what I believe Steve was asking, if there's one moment, it's when after the doctor dies, that he no longer has the doctor to depend on to guide him there. And this just came to me as we were talking here. So correct me if I'm wrong about it. But in the first half of the movie, the focus is mostly on the male characters. By the midpoint, it switches to the women. And particularly in the third act, it is all about the three women on the island there and what's going on among them.
No, that's a great observation, because Luton always had very strong characters. In fact, I think Body Snatchers is one of the rare times where a female doesn't really rise to the fore. Like, it really is a very male story. But I agree. Like, we have Kira, and we have Thea, and we have Mary St. Albans. It's like those three are kind of working as a triangle. And again, who's got the power? I love watching Mary St. Albans come down and face off against the general and tell her, you will leave her alone.
Karloff's falling under the superstitious spell, you know, as you guys mentioned, losing control of you know, him and Kira. I mean, they're like a WWE tag team partner. You know, I mean, they drive poor Thea crazy. I mean, there's scenes where Key is just mumbling through the door just to torment poor Thea. I felt so bad for that character.
And I think you can look at the dynamic among the three as the two older women at some level are really jealous of the younger and prettier woman.
Oh yeah.
Who is so healthy and so alive.
Mark Robeson, I mentioned earlier, is the director of this one. Very much has that Luton feel. But I think there's two other people I'd like to mention is that the editing is so sharp on this one, especially like in terms of the shorter cuts. Like the getting to the island, we get just like maybe a 2-second shot of them in the boat, and then suddenly they're on the island, and then suddenly they're up the stairs. Like this movie is moving, and our director of photography is Jack McKenzie, and he is capturing that great shadow and light that becomes the hallmark of any great Luton film.
Yeah, this film's 71 minutes, a little over 70 minutes long. So the action, it moves quickly.
And I believe it's the title is based on a famous old painting called Isle of the Dead. They actually show it beneath the credits in the beginning. And I went online, and you could actually buy a print of that poster, so of that painting. So I think I'm going to add it to my collection.
Well, and Robeson was the editor, I think, for Cat People and I Walked with a Zombie, Leopard Man. And then this was an opportunity for him to kind of step up. And I think Seventh Victim, I think, was his first film with Luton. And
Ghost Ship as well.
That's right. Yeah. Ghost Ship came in there as well. But he would go on to have quite the career. Like I said, Champion, Earthquake, Peyton Place.
And also a little kudos to Luton, because if I'm remembering my history correctly, for Seventh Victim, he was going to get a bigger budget because the previous films had done better. And the studio said, but you can't have Mark Robeson doing it because he's a first-time director. We don't give this a budget to first-time director. And Luton said, he's directing the film. So they took the budget away and made it back down to a B-class picture. So a lot of credit for Luton to stand behind his people that had been with him since the beginning of their RKO days. So you think of that today's standards, studios would have dropped people left and right for that budget. But Luton stuck to his people, and I really give him credit for that.
Well, when you think about how Luton basically came in and saved RKO, because Orson Welles' Citizen Kane and Magnificent Ambersons had nearly bankrupted the studio. And so, RKO looks over at what Universal's doing. They just had the resurgence with The Wolfman and A Son of Frankenstein in 1939. And they're like, we need to make some horror movies here. And they hire Val Lewton. And Val Lewton comes in and does Cat People. He does I Walk with a Zombie. And suddenly RKO is in the money again. So the fact that you wouldn't trust that guy is like, okay.
Plus the fact that they did hire him to make Universal films, and Luton hated the Universal films, and was forced to take titles like The Cat People and I Walk with a Zombie, and he went, "Oh yeah, okay, I'll show you what I do." And they were gonna be all up in arms against that until Cat People started making a shitload of money.
Yep,
it's a hilarious but shocking story of Luton's rise to power back then and what he had to do with what little he had, and still continued on.
It always amazes me because there's one thing in music. I'm a big music buff too, where you will actually seek out titles and records and albums by a certain producer, but you very rarely hear about a producer having a following. In motion pictures, it's just, I mean, directors obviously do, but it's kind of unheard of. And it's just a testament to what he did and the people he worked with and the direction he wanted to push these, and they obviously worked and stood the test of time.
What are some people's favorite moments from Isle of the Dead? We've mentioned a few, but I'm just curious if there are any others that are jumping to mind.
Of course, the one we mentioned that we all know, the scream is just incredible. This is the third time I'd seen it. Seeing it after COVID made me pay more attention to all the hand washing and stuff that was going on. And once you've been through something like that, you see the whole plot, on a way that you didn't see it before, that I didn't see it before. And that just changed everything a bit.
Did other people have that experience?
Absolutely. I did. There's even a scene where the doctor is speaking with the people, and he's got a mask on. He's not operating or anything, but he has a mask on.
He's just out in the field with his mask.
Yeah.
And this was another thing that kind of rang true for me this time. It probably had on previous viewings, but Karloff is right. The general is right. We should try to isolate this. If there's a risk, we should try and keep everybody here on the island. And so everybody, even though they have, it's kind of like what we were going through in COVID. Well, but it's Christmas. I need to go and visit my family. It's like, no, you need to stay here, because that's how you're going to keep your family safe, is you're not going to go and spread this to them. So all the way through that, I'm hearing the tyranny of Karloff's character, but I'm also hearing like that is the absolute rational thing to do. He's not coming from an emotional place as the other characters are. The other characters are coming from a place of, I need to connect with these people. I need to get home, etc. It's like Karloff's like, no, that is not, strategically, that's not the smart move.
That one scene, each character has a different excuse as to why. Well, I have to go. I have to be here. I have to do that. No. And he's like, what don't you get? No one may leave the island. Done.
It reminds me a lot of John Carpenter's The Thing, where it's like, nobody can leave this outpost. Like, nobody gets out of Kurt Russell's sight until we find this thing and get rid of it. I mentioned the scream earlier, but another favorite moment, I think, for me, comes at the very end that perfectly sums up Karloff's character. He's the general that was simply a man who was trying to protect us. And that's ultimately, and that's the other thing too that made it so cool about seeing this movie for the first time, was seeing Karloff play a heroic character, because he is very much a heroic character in this.
Yeah, he's trying to do the right thing.
Everybody in the film, there's no malevolent character. Everybody's going on their beliefs, no matter how twisted or delusional they might be. But everybody does think that they're correct in their beliefs.
I don't know. I thought Kira was a little wonky.
I wouldn't want Kira not on my side.
Well, you get no, never mind. I did like the fact that even the doctor, when he knew he was infected, and he's just like, it is, maybe I should have, prayed to Zeus or whatever. Maybe you were right, because my medicine is not working. And even him, like the general, I think it was more of a joking way, but maybe his character is realizing that maybe science is not the way to go. Maybe I should have prayed to somebody else and would have done that. But I also would love to give a shout out to some of the other actors in here. Jason Robards Sr. and especially Alan Napier, because I grew up watching Batman, and there was nobody more silly or goofy than Alfred. And if you watch enough of these 40s movies, especially the Universal, a lot of the thrillers and stuff at that time, Alan Napier was a acting genius because he played so many different characters and played the whole scale from the goofy to serious. And every time I see his name in the credits, I'm like, oh, great. Even though he's in a bit part, he just nails it every time. And he does it here as well.
The other person who pops up, and I love seeing this guy because you can't miss his face, is Skelton Nags. He's somebody he's a great character actor that we see in a lot of the Universal films, but he's the first one to go on the island.
Yeah.
But he was in Dick Tracy movies. He's in Bedlam. He's also in Ghost Ship. He's in The Picture of Dorian Gray. He's in The Lodger. He's in The Scarlet Claw. So if you're a genre fan of the 40s, you're probably going to see Skelton Nags somewhere. He's the very drawn, pockmarked face, but just always has a wonderful presence to him. You just feel creepy around him. And unfortunately, like Val Lewton, died very young. He was only 43 when he died, but he did a ton of films in that short amount of time.
And God knows you always need a tinsmith on hand.
Essential worker.
Yeah.
There's a line I wanted to just, because again, Lewton had a hand in the script here. Ardell Ray is our primary screenwriter. That says laws can be wrong and laws can be cruel, and who follows only the law is both wrong and cruel.
Love that line.
Everyone needs to hear, that there are times that the law should not be followed. Hello, civil disobedience. Appropriate for our time.
Yes.
Yes.
There's a great line in the movie given by the doctor, what's his name? Drosos?
Yeah.
Where he's speaking to another character. I forgot who it was. And the other character says, the general has put all of his hope in you and in the medicine. And the doctor comes back and he says, yeah, and that fact scares me even more than the plague. Which kind of gives you just an overview of the type of character Karloff's playing.
So that three-headed dog,
Cerberus. I mean, the dog, of course, is guard of the underground, and we're on the Isle of the Dead. So
it is there. It is the portal of hell.
Yeah.
So we are there, going into the underworld, and this is a transition point. And we see so many of our characters cross over and cross over and cross over. I think it's a really interesting recurring motif to go back to keep going back to that, being at the gates of the underworld and just kind of living in that space.
And the fact that when Mary is interred, they don't take her down, they take her up. It is the crypt where they put her is above them, which makes for very interesting visuals in that last part where she's moving down and away from everyone.
Well, let's circle back around, offer our final thoughts on these two films, Karloff, Lewton, and more. Mike, why don't we start things with you?
I think what John mentioned a couple of times is very important here. These are not movies for young viewers, I think. I think will not have the patience for it, particularly if they've been brought up on contemporary horror films. These will just be boring. There's nothing here. But when you have lived more of your life and experienced more things, then all of a sudden these movies make a lot more sense and have a lot more emotional weight than they had before. I mean, we've talked a lot about the great artistry behind them, but they really work on an emotional level too that I have found to be deeper every time I've seen them. And I guess this was the third time around for me for all of them. And I'm really glad to have been invited and asked to look at them again. It was really rewarding.
Thank you. It's a pleasure having you back, Mike. John.
Yeah, just adding on to Mike's point, Lewton stuff is incredible. If you have not experienced these two or any of his, find that box set or get the Blu-rays that are coming out. Yes, they are different than if you're expecting the Universal monsters. You're not going to get that, but you will get a lot of human monsters. And even if you take the stories, you could even turn the sound off, watch the visuals. And what Lewton does and his directors do with black and white photography is incredible, because it is what you see in the dark, what you almost see in the dark, or what is in bright daylight, you see. And yeah, watch for the bus. Watch for the bus and watch for the Luton walk, because he's going to run into a bus, horse, or whatever it might be. But you'll see some of the beginning jump scares start right here.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, essentially, like that term, the Luton bus, was part of the vernacular for a long time, and it has since become what we know as a jump scare. But, like it is that, that surprise shock. And oftentimes it's an innocuous one. It's the, it's the black cat jumping out of the closet or whatever, something that doesn't get you. But it does give you a moment of release from the suspense that's been building up. Steve?
Just going to pull in exactly what Mike and John already said. These Luton movies, to me, they have a very, very high rewatchable factor. I could watch Isle of the Dead every week for the rest of my life. I think it boils down to two things, mostly for me. It's mood and atmosphere. I mean, the cinematography, the black and white photography, the sets, the lighting, it boils down to mood and atmosphere. And it doesn't hurt, the fact that I think these are the two greatest roles Boris Karloff ever played. I'm a huge fan. Love him to death.
Tyler?
Well, first, I want to say, AC, thank you again for having me on. It was fun and fascinating listening to you, Mike, John, Steve. Great listening to all of you talk about these two wonderful movies. And I want to give a shout out to my late mother, who passed away just a couple years ago, and my father, who's still with us, for giving me this set back in 2009. I've seen each of these movies. Some of these I've seen twice to three times, including Isle of the Dead and I Walk with a Zombie. And every time I watch them, I get something new out of them every single time. And in fact, last October, with fellow friend of the show, Mackenzie Parker, and a couple of my other friends, Colin Jackson, Matt Weinstein, I got to introduce them to both Cat People and The Seventh Victim for the very first time. I think I'm going to throw another Val Luton double feature their way when we get together, and y'all are more than welcome to come join us for that, please. But I'm so happy that I have this set, and I'm very happy that I got to revisit these two movies for this show, and I'm looking forward to going through all these again and the bonus features. And I forget who mentioned it, but with the Warner Brothers DVDs, I probably should get these digitized sooner than later.
And we're here for physical media.
Yes,
right. I know. Right.
I love these movies, and I love the fact that people continue to rediscover them. They are something, I agree, Mike. I think there's something that definitely resonate more as you get older. On each subsequent viewing, I always get something more out of it. The performances, in this case, we were spotlighting Boris Karloff, but, Tom Conway and Simone Simon and people like that, like Luton always gives his performers a chance to shine within the beautiful cinematography. And they are just great tools in terms of storytelling. These performances, the lighting, the sound, and the atmosphere, which is kind of that intangible. I hope that our conversation today does raise the spotlight on Mr. Luton and his work, and looking forward to having you all on again very soon. And until next time, keep searching, keep exploring, and keep sharing the scare.